Gods and humans. There's no relationship quite as intriguing, especially when it comes to the Greeks. There are few mythologies that can contend with the Greeks when it comes to intimacy, devotion, and endless entertainment. Of course, what adds to the interest in Greek mythology that often goes unnoticed is a drastic shift in attitudes toward the gods as time progressed. From the gods being key players who spoke with mortals in Homer's Iliad, to the works of Plato where the names of gods are barely even mentioned, but instead spoken for as a whole. It really is kind of a shame since each Greek Olympian is so distinctive and interesting, mostly because the gods are really not that different from humans. Obviously, the gods are all-powerful and immortal, however, they're also vulnerable to cheating, bribing, and stealing like the rest of mankind. Really, the only difference is that we are the brutoi. We will inevitably die, while the closest gods will get to death is watching their children die. Speaking of the children of gods, there are without doubt few Greek texts that feature demigods and in turn the intimate relationship between God and man, quite as well as Homer's Iliad. After all, there's no better way of proving the existence of a god than, well, being the child of one. Well, most of the time, don't worry, we'll come back to you, Bacchus. In the Iliad, the gods are basically main stage characters. They have full scenes dedicated to them with their own side plots and interests. They make autonomous decisions that have real impact on our mortal characters. After all, the entire Trojan War was started over Aphrodite influencing Helen, Menelaus' wife, to fall in love with Paris over a stupid golden apple. The text is littered with demigods, the most famous being Achilles, of course, son of Thetis the sea nymph. Other famous demigods include Aeneas, son of Aphrodite, along with Sarpedon, son of Zeus. Oh, and did I forget to mention Helen, also demigod? Thanks, Zeus. You can never just keep it in your pants, bud. With so many scenes involving the gods, it's hard to choose which one to talk about. However, there's no better place to look than the first chapter itself, featuring the goddess of wisdom, Athena. To give some quick background, Agamemnon, leader of the Greeks, is fighting with star soldier Achilles because Agamemnon wants to take one of Achilles' girls. Classic men being stupid. Achilles is about ready to gut Agamemnon when Athena, being the rational one of course, grabs Achilles by the hair saying, "I have come down to stay your anger, but will you obey me? From the sky, and the goddess of the white arms Hera sent me, who loves both of you equally in her heart and cares for you. Come then, do not take your sword in your hand, keep clear of fighting." Or, less eloquently put, stop being dumb. Afterwards, Achilles goes to cry by the ships because bad man took his girl, and Mama Thetis, of course, comes to comfort him. Achilles basically asks Thetis to plead to Zeus to turn the tides against the Greeks to kill countless of his fellow soldiers and closest friends to make Agamemnon feel like a big dumb idiot. I guess I really don't know what he was thinking here. And Thetis, being the worried mother that she is, agrees along the lines of, "To a bad destiny I bore you in my chambers, but I will go to cloud-dark Olympus and ask the sing of Zeus who delights in the thunder. Perhaps he will do it." Thanks, Mom. Swiftly moving on to the Iliad's successor, the Odyssey, where we can witness just how petty the gods can get, and that the only beings better at holding grudges than humans are the gods themselves. The gods, unsurprisingly, also play key roles in Homer's sequel. Athena is Odysseus' right-hand goddess, and Poseidon is constantly trying to make Odysseus' life a living hell for blinding his Cyclops son, Polyphemus. Yikes. It makes sense that Athena has such a fondness for Odysseus, as his wit and intellect is often brought up in both texts. The two are associated so strongly that Odysseus even gets upset with Athena when she finally reveals herself when he arrives back in Ithaca, wrongly believing that she had abandoned him. "There was a time when you were kind to me in the days when we sons of the Achaeans were fighting in Troyland. But after we had sacked the sheer citadel of Priam, and went away in our ships and the gods scattered the Achaeans, I never saw you, daughter of Zeus, after that." In both the Odyssey and the Iliad, the gods are inextricable characters when it comes to affecting both the world and those that live in it. But as we move forward, the gods will begin to slowly draw out, much like an estranged family member I know. The next two works, the Oresteia by Aeschylus and the Bacchae by Euripides, we will see first off some juicy drama, but also a shift in the representation of gods. While the gods are still main characters in these works, their involvement feels more mythical and allegorical than Homer's writings. The Oresteia is a trilogy of plays that connect. However, we're going to immediately jump to the second play starring Orestes. For some context, Orestes has returned to Argos to find that his mother, Clytemnestra, has murdered his father, Agamemnon, and Apollo is not happy about it. Apollo has instructed Orestes to kill his mother or face the consequences of his father's murder going unreckoned. Wow. Orestes, with not many options, does just that. One of the most famous lines about obeying the gods comes from this exact scene where Orestes debates whether or not to go through with Apollo's revenge, until his friend Pallades reminds him about Apollo's threat: "Count all men hateful to you rather than the gods," which successfully convinces Orestes to kill his mom. Oh, but you didn't think Orestes was going to get away with matricide, did you? Killing one's mother is a big no-no for the Greeks. It was okay when Clytemnestra killed Agamemnon because while they were married, they weren't blood-related. And that's where the Furies, ancient female deities of vengeance, come in to enact some good old triple revenge. As the Furies chase Orestes to Athens, the audience is probably starting to catch on that this whole family murder cycle thing isn't really working. Luckily, Athena realized this too, which is why she introduced this little thing, you might have heard of it, called democracy. Some could argue that this whole trilogy is actually on the endgame of introducing Athenian democracy to the public in a sort of, hey, isn't this fun and cool? Do you want to not murder your family anymore? Look, Athena and Apollo endorsed this product. You wouldn't want to make them mad, would you? And yeah, I kinda have to agree. It does feel that way, which is a big part of why the involvement of the gods in these plays almost feels a bit forced, as if Aeschylus needed some sort of authority figure in his plays, and who better than literal gods? With the gods no longer physically intervening in wars or fighting like in Homer's work, it would make sense for the Greek public to try to instate means of making peace by also utilizing the gods. Moving forward, we arrive at my personal favorite play, the Bacchae, starring the god of all things fun like wine, theater, and insanity, Dionysus, or Bacchus depending on who you ask. Dionysus is the main character of this play. He is our narrator and protagonist who is trying to spread his name as a new god. Starting with Thebes, his birthplace, where his mother Semele conceived him with, you guessed it, good old Zeus. Meanwhile, our antagonist, Pentheus, the young king and Dionysus' cousin, is claiming, alongside his mother and aunts, that Semele was a dirty liar who didn't sleep with Zeus and birth a god. Cadmus, Pentheus' grandfather, is the only smart one who, just like me, doesn't get why everyone is so against having god blood in the family. And even if the god isn't real, why? Why even risk pissing him off? At the very start, Tiresias, the blind seer who is always right and yet nobody listens to, and Cadmus both warn Pentheus. Even if this Dionysus is no god, as you assert, persuade yourself that he is. The fiction is a noble one, for Semele will seem to be the mother of a god, and this confers no small distinction on our family. A round of applause, please. I mean, these are two of the most sensible people I have ever seen in a Greek tragedy, which is not saying a ton, but we will take what we can get. Of course, Pentheus doesn't listen to reason, and ends up smack-talking, flirting, and whatever, and imprisoning Dionysus, who is disguised as a prophet, despite Dionysus' many warnings to not mess with the gods. Really, their whole relationship can be summed up by that one quote that goes like, "What is a king to a god? Well, what is a god to a non-believer? Still a god, believe it or not." And non-believers, on the other hand, end up getting torn apart by their own mother while in drag. Pretty awful way to go out, but at least Dionysus knows how to make a death iconic. Alright, history time. I know, boring. But it's important to us seeing how we get from the obey the gods or die mindset to the maybe obey the gods or die mindset in Plato's Apology. In 431 BC, war broke out between the Greek cities of Sparta and Athens. It was a grueling war that cost thousands of lives, especially when a terrible plague hit Athens, one of the main causes that led to Athens' eventual defeat. Up until the plague, the people's faith in the gods remained fairly strong, with plenty of quotes similar to, "Instead, let us with the help of heaven go forward to meet the aggressor." However, with the amount of death that resulted from the plague, it was understandable why people felt abandoned by the gods. They didn't even have time to properly bury their dead, which is a huge rite for the Greeks. It was believed that a person's soul was trapped in their body until they were properly buried. Someone could fall ill any day, so it made sense that they threw out their fear of both human and heavenly law. No fear of God or law of man had a restraining influence. As for the gods, it seemed to be the same tilling whether one worshipped them or not, when one saw the good and the bad dying indiscriminately. It's easy to believe in the gods when things are going great. It's when times get hard that faith naturally tends to disappear. See, this is why I didn't want to talk about history. It's so dark and real. Whatever, let's just get to Socrates already. People often make the assumption that Socrates was some sort of atheist who did not believe in the Greek gods. However, these people would be sorely mistaken. Socrates did believe in the gods, but he also made it his mission to question everything in life, including godhood. Socrates says in Plato's Apology, as he defends himself against the Athenian court for corrupting the youth, "I'm unable to establish whether you're saying I teach the young to believe that there are gods of some sort, in which case, I believe there are gods myself, so that I'm not a total atheist. I'm innocent on that score. Just different ones, not the ones the city believes in." To draw a parallel with Western Christianity, the Iliad is the equivalent of someone living at the same time that Jesus walked the earth and performed miracles. Meanwhile, Socrates is similar to many people during the Enlightenment era in Europe, who began to call into question the actual importance of the church. It's not that people stopped believing in the gods altogether, it's just that it's a lot easier to convince someone when they're constantly surrounded by miracles and signs from heaven. Whereas, in the days of Socrates, the gods had begun to lose their prevalence. When the worldview expands and people are introduced to new cultures and mindsets, for better or for worse, I'm looking at you, Christianity, it's only natural to question what was known before and what will come, especially after death. If it is the underworld manned by Hades that waits for us, or something entirely different. Well, whatever it may be, much like Socrates, it will not stop me from indulging in the many joys and wonders Greek mythology has to offer, even if I don't believe in Zeus smiting non-believer.